Okay, and we are live once again, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for watching today. This is the Progress Texas Happy Hour for this week. My name is Chris Mosier. I'm the producer of the audio and video part of this program, so I'm typically lurking in the background. Luckily, a lot of folks are either on paternity leave or vacation or whatever, and I've been allowed to skulk out from the shadows, and I appreciate the opportunity to host today. We're here with the Progress Texas Communications Manager, Wesley Story, also President Ed Espinosa. We are joined as we continue our efforts to support and cover the Democrats in D.C., the large group of Texas lawmakers you've heard about who are doing their thing from D.C. to stop quorum on several bills at the Texas State House. Amongst them, from Dallas, Representative Ana Maria Ramos joins us. Hello, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Good to be back. So great to have everybody. We start out typically with a little bit of fun before we get into topics that are not as much fun, a bit of an icebreaker here. Just so happens that the opening ceremonies of the Tokyo Olympics are coming up tomorrow. It's a very exciting moment, and we're going to do a little round robin here and have everyone weigh in with the sport and or the athlete or team that they are most excited to see in action at the Olympics. And let's start off with Wesley.
Yeah, so I really love watching the Olympics. I'm a huge fan of the women's gymnastics team, specifically Simone Biles. So I will definitely be watching her performance. And also Jordan Childs, who made the team this year. She's been training with Simone in Texas. So shout out to both of them because they're doing their training here in Texas. And Simone specifically is from Houston. So that's what I'm most looking forward to. But I'll also be watching volleyball because I really like volleyball.
How about you, Ed?
Yeah, I love the Olympics. Growing up in LA and being around the 1984 Olympics was just like really an impressionable moment on a young Ed Espinosa. And then going to UCLA, where so many of the events were held, including gymnastics. The thing I love the most about the Olympics are the sports that I get to see the least, right? So I love soccer. Obviously, I'm going to watch Olympic soccer, but it's like diving, swimming, canoeing, like basically like all the water sports that you don't get to see that much, I think are great. Plus, like diving, there's not a lot of levels in diving, right? Like you have like grand champion, and then you have like a guy who got hurt doing it once and didn't do it again, right? So like you get to see that in the Olympics, and I that's the kind of stuff I'm really looking forward to.
Representative Ramos, what do you think?
And let me know if it starts breaking up. I might have to take off my headphones and go straight to the computer, but I'm looking forward to, I love track. My son was in track and cross country. I love seeing the women run. They look like machines, like artwork. When you see them, just their body is pure toned muscle. It's something I dream of having. Never one day. I mean, that'll never happen, but I enjoy seeing women compete. Beautiful women just running and taking their body to the next level. I love seeing that.
Very cool. I'm right along with a lot of what you guys have said. I'm excited in particular for me. I'm a bit of a football guy, American football, Ed. And so that's not an Olympic sport. But my wife loves the Olympics. I'll end up watching a bunch of it. There's one particular athlete that I'm interested in following, and that is Kat Osterman, who, of course, is the so-called Michael Jordan of softball from UT. She's amazing. And I'll tell you why. I actually got to be completely undeservedly was a teammate of Kat Osterman's once at that annual Reckless Kelly softball game that they used to have at the Dell Diamond. And when I was a teammate of hers, she actually struck out Ricky Williams, pitching to Ricky Williams. And so that was an amazing feat. She's such a cool person and has such a great story. She's got another chance to perform really well at the Olympics again in softball. And so I'm excited to see Kat Osterman do her thing. So nice. Now that we are past that, let's get to business. And the business of Texas politics from the progressive perspective, of course, has been the measures that have been taken by our Democratic representatives, a great number of whom are sequestering in Washington, D.C., in the nation's capital right now, amongst them State Rep Ana Maria Ramos, who's joined us. And so let's start off with you, Ms. Ramos, and tell us, after a couple of weeks there, How are you? And let's also preface by saying this is something that is not without huge sacrifice and huge inconvenience for the people who are doing this for our state. How are you personally holding up, and how's it going for you?
Thank you. It's going well. It's every day. I think we're just definitely inspired by talking to my peers and seeing just how we're all pushing through together. It's like any other thing that you do. Well, any other time you're having to run from your state and stay locked in a hotel, what you would expect in that type of situation. But, I love to read. I love to learn. And every day we have like a new speaker, somebody to kind of encourage us. And not only, the people back home, of course, amazing. But for example, today, we had a Zoom conference. We have a Zoom conference every day. We have a conference every day. And Beto spoke to us today and kind of educated us on a little bit of history when he taught government, I think a semester or two ago, but about just the history of what we're doing and how it's part of history, right? When you go back to the Voting Rights Act and civil rights and just really the overall oppression and suppression of voters in Texas and kind of why we're here today. So, it's tough being away from family, being away from our children, our pets. Democrats love their pets, so it's tough. I have 3 dogs at home, but it's definitely well worth the fight.
Very, very good. So you have accomplished a couple of things. Putting the brakes on things that are happening that nefariously here at the Capitol in Austin, but also gaining a lot of national media attention. And from your perspective, do you feel like the mission is working so far in terms of raising public awareness and perhaps spurring the U.S. Congress to step in and help?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We had a part of our conference yesterday were Secretary of States from different states, from Minnesota to Colorado to Pennsylvania. So Rhode Island, different secretaries of state chimed in, kind of, letting us know about how they advanced voter rights. And really, it's actually access to vote, right? Or protections for voters. And so that, in addition to the conversation we had with Jim Clyburn and other representatives and senators, and it's very encouraging and more than anything, elevating this conversation to the national level beyond Texas, because we know other states have passed voter suppression legislation. But what to me as a civics instructor is most valuable is that it put kind of a pause on this to ensure that people are watching. And the more you know about these laws that these Republicans are trying to pass, the less you like it. The more you become aware of how egregious and how damaging this type of legislation is. And so I'm glad that we have been able to elevate this to the national level. And in addition to meeting with VP Harris and some of the conversations that we had in terms of the advocacy from the White House. So we hope soon to be able to have that conversation with President Biden, but everybody here in DC has been very supportive, and so have people back home.
That's great to hear. One of the things I think is so important about this is that the issue that you all are bringing to DC, it's not just Texas, right? Like the Brennan Center came out with a report recently that said voter suppression laws have been passed in 17 states just since the beginning of the year, all based on the big lie and all from Republican legislatures. Can you talk a little bit about what it's been like to not only get all of this great national media attention that you've received, but to kind of carry this on your shoulders on behalf of the other states out there that are going through this, to really say, like, look, this is just more than one state. This is a huge issue.
Oh, absolutely. So those of you who don't know me, I've always been a kind of a civics nerd. So since I was 18, my first community college class in Dallas, my civics instructor, got us to start talking about, what we do, right, in government. You talk to your students about voting. And so part of our program or part of our class was go and volunteer at the polls, go, call your local representatives. And so since 18, more than 20 years now, I've been volunteering at the polls, serving as a poll watcher or election clerk or bilingual clerk or whatever, always involved in politics. And so when I, read this bill, and I'm one of those individuals like many who watch this to kind of take an elderly grandparent or a neighbor to go vote and to go help, or who's a deputy registrar or who has registered people to vote. So reading this bill, this HB3 specifically, it's not just something, a theory, right, or something distant or removed. It's my life. It's the life of my neighbors who have been part of this. It's my grandmother. So this has been so important for us. And I'm glad that we've stopped it and elevated, because when you really look at the bill, I mean, what this bill allows, for example, for poll watchers, right, who are partisan observers, especially in our Texas law, they don't have to be trained. So you essentially have the same individuals who stormed the U.S. Capitol, who were unhappy and wanted to overturn the election by being aggressive and storming the U.S. Capitol. Those same individuals, a lot of them have returned home to Texas. Those same individuals are going to be storming the ballot places, right? Are going to be storming our local polling places, standing there intimidating our voters, looking over my grandmother's shoulder, looking over your shoulder. Yeah, it's the same people who were unhappy and promoting that big lie that these Republicans want in your neighborhoods, at your polling places, intimidating you. And mind you, with their law, they don't even have to be trained. They don't even have to know what the law is. But the law specifically says that they can wander freely anywhere there is an election activity within the polling place, freely, close enough to observe and hear what election activity is happening within the polling place. So think about it. Within a feet or two from where you're at, one of these Proud Boys could be looking over your shoulder to see who you're voting for and what you're doing. And God forbid, if you don't speak the language, they're really going to be attacking you. So it's a bigger deal. It's not just it is a black and brown issue, but not just a black and brown issue. It's anybody who wants to preserve the privacy of their freedom of speech through practicing their right to vote, their constitutional right to vote. Any Proud Boy will be able to be looking over your shoulder and ensuring and seeing what you're doing. And that is just, it's alarming that these Republicans are so aggressive in pushing forward such an egregious, damaging, harmful bill. And we have to do, and I'm glad that we're here and doing what we can to stop it.
And one item, in addition to what you're saying about these partisan poll watchers, is that they're allowed to get multiple warnings before they're excused or escorted out of the polling places. So in other words, they could just strategically keep committing infractions, knowing that it's almost like in sports where you have a foul to give. They're allowing them to have a foul to give on somebody's right to vote. It's really tragic in that sense.
Meanwhile, they don't.
And go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, meanwhile, the folks who may not be aware that they're not able to vote, folks like Crystal Mason, aren't given that second chance. They're arrested and they're sent to jail because this is all just a means to try to get less voters to vote in Texas. I'm really happy that you brought this up and we're talking about the specifics of the bill, because one thing we've seen from Republicans, one of the messages they continue to repeat is just saying there aren't measures. This is just solidifying the process that we already have. Yesterday, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick had a press conference where he talked about people haven't been reading the bill. They don't actually know what's in it. This is a conversation about what's in the bill. We know that it bans drive-through voting. We know that it gives partisan poll watchers special rights to intimidate voters. It limits early voting hours. I'm interested to know, Representative, what are some of the things that you are seeing from the other side, some of the lies that you are interested in just kind of stomping them right now? Like, what have you seen from the folks who are on the other side here in Texas?
Well, it's when you really think about it and put things into perspective. I mean, anybody who follows me on Twitter knows that on the House floor, I tried to, as much as I could, take pictures of the voting and posting on how these people voted. I mean, these are the same people who still think that President Trump, or President Trump is still the president, that Biden shouldn't be the president of the United States. These are the same people who said COVID was a hoax, right? These are the same people. And when you said they don't do their bills, like it so many times on the House floor, when a Republican would get up to lay out a bill, they hadn't even read it. So they didn't even know what their bill is. They don't write their bills. There's an organization whose goal is to suppress the vote throughout the country, and they just take this bill and file it in every different states. They were counting on us not reading it, getting it through as fast as they could, and by the time our people realized there's a Proud Boy looking over the shoulder in the polling place, it was going to be too late. And we had to do everything that we could to stop it. But when you talk about the poll watcher, they could literally commit a crime by intimidating the voter or interfering in your right to vote, and nothing happens to them. However, the election judge or the clerk that's working there, if they do anything to inadvertently obstruct the view of this poll watcher, they can have criminal sanctions. So that is just the imbalance of power. It's literally taking power from these election workers who are, getting minimum wage, but doing their civic duty. And many of these are elderly people who've been doing this forever. The Republicans want to criminalize those people and then let the Proud Boys wander freely within your polling places. That's ridiculous. That's dangerous. And I'm very close to, we have amazing precinct chairs in my district, and I'm very close to them. And a lot of our precinct chairs became election judges or clerks. And I know during this past election, they even had trouble with individuals who wanted to go in and volunteer. Election workers who didn't want to wear masks, right? So they were going around close to people during a pandemic and not recognizing or not following social distancing and scaring away voters. So that's what they were doing during a pandemic to scare away voters. They will stop at nothing. We know that. And we can't allow these Republicans to continue to really undermine the Texan people, right? Texas voters, because they're basically telling Texas voters, we don't trust that you're making the decision. Because remember, their Secretary of State that Abbott appointed, now we're going to be going on our third Secretary of State in 3 years. It speaks to another one of Governor Abbott's failures. Yeah, another one of Governor Abbott's failures. That Secretary of State said there was the election, there was no irregularity, there was no fraud. It was safe and secure. She said it, she spoke to it, she testified that our elections were safe and secure. Even though we were in a pandemic, people came out in record numbers. People did, whatever they had to do. I was out there watching them rushing home after, rushing to the polling place with their masks on, standing in line, staying away, but staying for hours to vote. It's not how we voted, okay? Because the Secretary of State said there is no irregularity. It was safe and secure. It is not how we voted, but it's who we voted for. Republicans don't like the fact that we vote for people within the community. It has nothing to do with how we voted. It has everything to do with who we voted for. And Republicans know they can't compete on ideas and policies. So what they're going to do is take away your voice and my voice to even speak up at the polling place.
It's a lot on your shoulders right now, and God bless you for for taking it all, in and keeping up the fight. Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
I was just going to say, with all of that happening and even more happening that we'll talk about here in a second, what sort of feedback, Representative Ramos, are you getting from your folks back in Dallas? What sort of constituent sort of noise are you hearing?
I am getting nothing but love and support from people in our community, Dallas County residents, people from all over the state. Yeah, it is wonderful. And though I will say there are those trolls, people that are not even in my community. It's the same people that stormed the Capitol, right? That their response is not education and information, it's attacks, right? And lies, right? Misinformation and lies is what they do. So those people are still there. I don't know if they have jobs or not. They could go and storm the Capitol, they can stay at home all day on Twitter, or what did Trump say, in a basement or something. These same people are out there, and I don't think it's I don't think it's a coincidence that these are the same people who are sending us racist messages saying, go back to Mexico, calling our peers here the N-word over and over again, saying when you come back in a box. These are the same people that the Republicans want to protect through this bill. These are the same people that the Republicans want to look over your shoulder and my shoulder when we go vote. These are the same people who are being, racist through some anonymous names on social media that are going to be really storming our polling places in Texas. It's unfortunate.
We've definitely seen a point in our history where that element has been emboldened by the last, 5 years or so. And so I guess we're just going to have to continue to slog through that. Let's pivot to some of the other things that the Democrats in D.C. have put the brakes on, at least for the moment, in particular education stuff, which is also making national news. There was a USA Today report on what was happening with anti-critical race theory bills that are going through, or that they would like to put through. The Senate's been active with that, including recently the striking through of mentions of the moral underpinnings of what was happening with the Ku Klux Klan during that era of history. Representative Ramos, talk about critical race theory, what your view is on what they want to do and why it's wrong.
What the Republicans are saying through these bills is they don't trust Texas teachers. They don't trust Texas teachers to teach facts, to teach history, and to teach our children, right, what was morally right and just. And it's throughout history, right? They believe the KKK was a good thing. For them to want to strike this out and not include this could only let us deduce that is what they're trying, the message they're trying to send, right? And honestly, sitting on the House floor and looking through they introduced this, of course, in the regular session. And, we added an amendment that said, okay, if you're going to introduce, deny teachers the right to teach this, then we need to teach that there were domestic terrorists, insurgents who tried to overturn an election on January 6th in the United States of America. And they said, no, we can't teach that. We can't teach that. These same Republicans, straight up, it has nothing to do with education or facts. It has everything to do with their losing the grip on reality. They're still pushing forward the big lie, and they're denying the truth, right? They're not about facts and truth. They're about lies and deception. And that's what critical race theory is. And they want teachers to teach the lies and deception that they want to push, right? By denying teachers the right to teach. And so they're censoring teachers, and they're telling teachers, we don't trust you to teach what you need, what facts are. We don't trust Texas teachers. So we got to tell you what we want you to teach. That's just wrong. My daughter's a teacher. I'm an educator. I know what we know what we're doing.
One of the things we've also seen with so-called critical race theory is that it stems from an ardent opposition to diversity, equity, and inclusion education. And critical race theory is really just a smokescreen against DEI. It started last fall with somebody who was very upset with the Treasury Department's DEI efforts. He went on a big rant on Fox News to try to get the attention of Donald Trump. He did. Donald Trump then ended the diversity, equity, and inclusion training for the Treasury Department. And then from there, they've sort of made this their cause the first 6 months of this year. You see it in school board elections all over Texas, all over America, where their anti-DEI efforts are masked as critical race theory. It's literally the only time they've been in favor of masks. But the thing is that it's also, it's people, it's the same people, right? It's a new issue, but it's the same people. It's the anti-maskers, it's Texas values, people who are against LGBT equality, it's people who are supportive or empathize with the Proud Boys. The usual suspects are the same. The issue might be new, the usual suspects are the same, and they just can't be trusted.
Yeah, and when you look at this, it's not a coincidence that these racists, these KKK people, all of these anti-diversity people feel comfortable under one party, which is the Republican Party. It's not a coincidence that they bring these people in. I'm not saying that every Republican is a racist, but most racists are Republicans. When you put them in that pot, that's what's going on. And think about it. I mean, the facts speak for themselves. Look at our Texas House Republicans. They literally have they're the majority party. So what do they have, like 76 members or what have you? There's literally 3 minorities in the Texas House Republican Party. 3 minorities when they're the majority. The Democrats, we have 67, and I want to say maybe 60 of us are minorities, and we're the minority party. So, it's unfortunate, and it's not Texas. It's not what Texans believe. It's not Texas values. It's people holding on to the past and denying the present and trying to hide from the future.
And I think one of their people of color used to be a Democrat.
Yes.
Just to provide a little bit of context on this, I have a list of things that are in the bill that was passed this past week. Some of the things that Texas Republicans are trying to white out of the history books. So here are a few of those things. The women's suffrage and equal rights movement, the civil rights movement, the history of white supremacy, including the Ku Klux Klan, which we've already talked about, Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail and his I Have a Dream speech, the Federal Civil Rights Act of 1964, the United States Supreme Court decision in Brown versus the Board of Education. These are all essential things that all of us learn growing up, whether you're in Texas or in other states throughout the country. And they're so important to understanding our history. I think, something that y'all have already touched on is that students deserve to have an education that deals in facts, not folklore. And when we erase these uncomfortable realities, we're really doing them a disservice because we're not preparing them to go into the world and understand our present so that they can work toward a better future. So not only is this just an issue dealing with race and how Republicans don't want to have these uncomfortable discussions, but they're also setting up Texas children for failure at the end of the day.
We're coming up on the end of our allotted time, guys, and we have managed to get through this entire discussion without any mention at all of the fact that there is a giant self-inflicted wave of COVID infections coming our way by all indications, affecting almost exclusively people who have not been vaccinated. Governor Abbott thus far has not only not come out with any kind of encouragement for people to get vaccinated, he's gone out of his way to make sure that cities understand and school districts understand that they will not be allowed to impose any kind of masking limits on that. So before we wrap up, Representative Ramos, give us a bit on COVID and what should we do? What can we do?
Well, once again, this is the man who said, he is the leader of the #1 state of uninsured people in the whole country. And he's telling these uninsured people, you don't have to wear a mask. And it's his people who are going to get sick, the unvaccinated, who were within the last 3 months, are taking up 95% of hospitalizations for COVID. And so we know the vaccine works. We are all vaccinated here. We've been tested here. We did have a couple of people that did come out positive, but at the end of the day, it's because the vaccines work. They're positive. They're, slight discomfort. They're in their rooms quarantining, but that's because the vaccine works. Nobody has had to be hospitalized. Nobody is on a respiratory machine in the hospital. We know that that's what's happening to the unvaccinated. And Abbott is telling Texans, we don't care if you're taking up that hospital space and you can't breathe and you may die because you're unvaccinated. You have the freedom to die and you have my full faith and support. That's what Governor Abbott is telling his unvaccinated people. I'm giving you the freedom to die because I couldn't care less if you have insurance or not. And I couldn't care less if our hospital workers are overloaded because I have given you a big lie, telling you this is a hoax, telling you Trump is the president. It's nonsense. So everybody who hasn't gotten vaccinated, if you're still sitting on the fence, do it. It works. We're all here testament to that, the vaccines work. And I encourage everybody to go get vaccinated.
Wesley and I, right before we rolled, shared a story that was in the news from a Texas nurse. Wesley, would you relate that story about her experience with some of the folks dying of COVID lately?
Yeah, I believe she was actually a doctor, but this was something that was going around Facebook yesterday. She said that when she was having to intubate some of her patients that were coming in who weren't vaccinated, they were asking for the vaccine. And she unfortunately had to tell them, at this point, it's too late. If it was going to help you, you would have had to get it a few weeks ago. And so I think I don't want to end on a terrible note, but that's something that's really important for people to recognize is you don't want to do it when it's too late. You want to get the vaccine now. I'm encouraging everyone I know who may not have been vaccinated to get vaccinated. The most recent data shows that only around 42% of Texans have been vaccinated, and the national average is at 50%. And they say that we need around 75 to 90 in order to actually achieve herd immunity. So we are nowhere close to where we need to be as a state. And our state leaders, Governor Abbott, is not doing what he needs to do to get those numbers up. Instead, he's prioritizing voter suppression bills, attacks on trans kids, attacks on abortion care with his special session. So he's threatened to call another one. And I think what we all need to be doing as Texans who care about one another and care about each other's health is calling for Abbott to actually make the priority of another special session COVID. Yeah. We have not had a special session to address this healthcare crisis yet.
Absolutely.
Right.
And that's going to wrap it up for guys.
Broke out,
Go ahead, Ms. Ramos.
Yes. No, I was just going to say when the pandemic broke out, he chose not to call a special session, but this special session was emergency for him to secure his next election. It's nonsense. It's not about Texans or Texas families.
I think it's kind of down to not only personal choices and how we behave, but also reaching out to people we know personally to ask them to get vaccinated for us because we love them. And that's going to do it, y'all. Go ahead, Ed.
I want to add one last thing on who's not getting vaccinated, because we know a lot of them are conservatives or people who live in rural areas who are unfortunately listening to Donald Trump. But the thing is, it's also more than that. It's a lot of young people, people who are under the age of 30 or 35 who really think that they're immune to this, or maybe that it's just not going to hurt them. It's also communities of color, people that look like me and Representative Ramos, who either don't know enough about it, even at this point, or don't have access to it, or just haven't really seen the need for it. You'd be surprised who has chosen not to get vaccinated at this point. It's not hard to get the vaccine. It is free and it is everywhere. Please make sure your friends and family are vaccinated. Let's get out of this pandemic together.
Wesley, anything to close with?
No, I completely agree, Ed. And then also just folks who may not be able to get vaccinated. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but children under 12 can't get vaccinated. Lots of folks who may have other health issues may not be able to get vaccinated. So not only should you get vaccinated to save your loved ones, but also for the young children who are about to start going to school who aren't able to get vaccinated, we should be getting vaccinated to protect them too.
Yeah.
In our house, we've been hoping and praying and wishing for a halfway normal school year, and of course, those dreams are now in jeopardy based on what's coming up. We could do a whole episode on COVID. We really only had to tack it on to the end, and we're out of time here. State Representative Anna Marie Ramos of Dallas, there in D.C. Thank you so much for what you and all your colleagues are doing, and Godspeed and best of luck. And let us know what's happening.
Thank you.
And Wesley and Ed, that's going to do it for the Progress Texas Happy Hour for this week. Thank you so much for watching. If you've been listening in podcast form, thank you so much for doing that. Make sure and subscribe and share. Do check out progresstexas.org to follow us on socials and subscribe to our email. We got lots of stuff going on both here and in DC. Thanks again so much for watching, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I think we're still live.